Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. Last week, it was pretty much just one major talker in the report of Nintendo's next console rumors. But this week, we have a whole lot more to discuss. We're going to kick things off this episode with news around the world of Nintendo, but we'll be focusing our main segment on all the news that came out of the Pokémon Presents stream earlier this week, and then we're going to do a little retrospective on one of the most beloved Nintendo games of all time at the tail end of the show. Joining me for all of that is Kyle Hilliard. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing good. Yeah, normal time for me.
Well, that's good. As you know, Kyle, I had a microphone crisis before this started, so apologies if the sound is a little weird.
Crisis is the right word.
Yes, it was almost world-ending over here. No, my microphone fell out of the stand, and I had to find an alternate way to prop this microphone up. So, we're just kind of rolling with the punches today. But, Kyle, we have some news to discuss before we get to the Pokemon Presents that we're going to be talking about during the main segment today. First up, Nintendo released its first financial report since the launch of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and as you probably expected, the numbers are pretty good. So, according to the report, which goes to as of June 30th of this year, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has sold 18.51 million units.
Jeez, okay.
Nintendo says this helped them have the highest global sell-through of first party for the first quarter since the Switch launched in 2017. So pretty good numbers.
Yeah, you always assume Zelda's like massive, but then you kind of look at the numbers and it's like Zelda's like does really well for Nintendo, but it's no like, Mario Kart, right? Like it's not, and my understanding is it's not quite as big in Japan as it is in America, but I could be wrong about that. Like it's big everywhere, but not as big, right? Is what I'm saying. So it's surprising to hear that number in a way, even though it shouldn't be, because the game was a massive hit and it's all everyone talked about during the month of May,
So how about this number? According to Nintendo, the sales of Tears of the Kingdom account for about half of the first-party software sold this fiscal year so far.
Jeez. Yeah, well, you make a good game, you get rewarded.
You think that's a good game?
I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're probably... Yeah, no, it's amazing. And Nintendo also sold about 4 million new Switches, which is about 14% more than this same time last year. So,
guys, just even the hardware got just a huge Tears of the Kingdom bump.
Yeah, they were basically saying like, hey, like because Tears of the Kingdom did so well, it actually encouraged people to go out and buy a Switch.
Man, imagine if they'd had a Switch to 1.5 or whatever.
Hey, well, it sounds like one is coming potentially next year, so I don't know if they're going to do it at that point.
Yeah.
But with this news, Kyle, it's time to update the sales charts for Nintendo. The Switch is now sold 129.53 million units, which still trails the DS by about 25 million units. So
it honestly, it surprises me that it's still trailing the DS. Does the DS count every version of the DS Lite, DS?
Yes, it does not count the 3DS, but it counts the DS, like all the DS models that came out.
Jeez, okay.
And then Tears of the Kingdom also made its debut in the top 10 chart of Switch overall sales. So it is now number 9 on the charts, above New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe and below Super Mario Party.
Yeah, see, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, you'd think Zelda would be like Zelda and Mario Odyssey, right? Or Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey would be like number 1 and 2 with a bullet. But it's like, no, it's actually like Mario Party and Mario Kart. Like, I've always been kind of surprised to look at that list.
To be fair, Super Mario Party's been out for a lot longer.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, yeah.
But the chart now is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, easy number 1. It beats out number 2, which is Animal Crossing New Horizons, by about 13 million still.
Jeez.
Animal Crossing New Horizons, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, number 3. Number 4, Breath of the Wild. Number 5, Super Mario Odyssey. Number 6, Pokemon Sword and Shield, but right on its tail now is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Number 8, Super Mario Party. Number 9, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And number 10, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. So
U
it's still,
Deluxe. That is, yeah, that's weird.
we got to
That's
think that a lot of
surprising.
people just skipped the Wii U.
Yeah, I
So
guess. I mean, it's also been out for a while. It is the newest 2D Mario available on the platform, which is sort of like, everybody wants that.
yeah, I
But
wonder
yeah,
if how Super Mario Brothers Wonder is going to do, because like you always think like, all right, well the 2D Mario games aren't going to do as well as the 3D ones, but at the same time, that looks like a pretty novel twist on the entire thing.
well, I think the 2D ones do sell better though, don't they?
Well, I mean, I know that New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe was a port instead of an all new game for the Switch,
Right.
but it going by the numbers, it trails Mario Odyssey by about 10 million units.
Okay, okay. I guess, and then I mean, we talked about just briefly how big the DS is, right? It's like Nintendo's best-selling console ever,
Yeah,
right? And I
by
mean,
a long shot.
and a lot of that is, I don't know if people even remember it at this point, but new Super Mario Brothers on the DS was like a revelation, kind of, right? Like we hadn't had a proper Nintendo 2D Mario in a long time at that point, and that's why that system was such like a colossal hit, because everyone just wanted a new 2D Mario,
Yeah, I mean that was one of the many reasons that
Yeah, yeah, that's
the
true.
DS was a colossal hit. I mean, it's kind of like how people are always like, "Oh, well, the PS2 is the number
No.
one selling console of all time," only because it had the DVD drive and it was cheaper than like other DVD players at the time. It's like, yeah, well, that was a big factor, but it was also just a massive library of amazing games as well. Um, but with this new data, which accounts for the first month and a half of Tears of the Kingdom's life cycle, where do you think Tears of the Kingdom is going to end up? Do you think it outsells Breath of the Wild? Breath of the Wild currently number 4 at 30.65 million units. Tears of the Kingdom is at 18.5 million units.
Oh man, I think it might, just because of the install base, right? Like more people have Switches now than they did when Breath of the Wild came out.
They
And if
do.
you go buy a Switch today, you're going to pick up Tears of the Kingdom. You're not going to pick up Breath of the Wild, right?
Maybe you pick up both.
I don't think you do. I mean, genuinely, I think you just pick up Tears of the Kingdom. So I
Yeah,
think it
probably.
has, and oh man, I think it has the potential, which is not what I was saying a couple months ago. But
Yeah. It's
yeah,
I think it ekes by it. And I think that a lot of people, it's got to be the social media impact as well, where everybody's still sharing their weird ultra hand creations and all their ways that they're getting across the world and everything. And I think that that is still buoying a lot of the enthusiasm of this game. I mean, it's a great game in its own right, but we exist in a world where social media is probably the most effective marketing tactic at this point, and word of mouth is incredibly strong about the Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Speaking of Tears of the Kingdom, according to Automaton, which I'm not familiar with that outlet, but Nintendo has filed more than 30 patents related to Tears of the Kingdom. And I'm reading this over on GameDeveloper.com. And here's some of the things that are listed in the patents that are filed. Ultra Hand and Fuse, which the mechanics, the primary mechanics that let players move items around and then combine them, and that's something that other games have done, but they those are the selling points for a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of people for Tears of the Kingdom. Some of the ally abilities, like Riju's Lightning Storm, specifically are mentioned. Here's a weird one. The in-game loading screen during fast travel, where it shows Link on the Hyrule map and then blinks over to wherever he's fast traveling to.
Oh, weird. I mean, that is a cool little feature. I do like that.
Yeah,
But
it's just an interesting thing to try to patent.
yeah, I mean, I guess with companies, they'll just throw out a lot of patents and see what sticks, right? It's like, it's just covering your bases. It's like a legalese kind of thing. Uh, but yeah, I wouldn't think of that as like some unique mechanic to Tears of the Kingdom. Although I can't really think of another example of it in another game off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think it's such a passive thing that, like, if another game was to do it, I may not even realize it.
Yeah, right. I
Because a
wouldn't be
lot of
like, oh,
times,
that's a Tears of the Kingdom thing. I would just be like, oh, it's a map.
yeah, because like when a loading screen pops up, I'm usually like, oh, let me see what I can look at on my phone for the next 10 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then also, this was the one that GameDeveloper.com pointed out as like one of the weirder ones. They somehow managed to file a patent. I mean, these are filed; these aren't necessarily approved. But
Right. Yeah.
when the player's character and a dynamic object come in contact in the downward direction relative to the character, movement of the dynamic object is added to the movement of the player's character. So, like if a character comes into contact with another character, basically just the theory of relativity, right?
Okay. Yeah. Or
They
physics,
patented
I
that.
guess, in general. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting way of wording that. But yeah, I mean, do any of these seem like weird aside from that loading map?
No, I don't know. I don't know a lot about how game developers approach patents in general. You know what I mean? Like this could be like totally common. Like there might be a bunch of patents out there for like Far Cry 6, just
Yeah.
like things that are kind of unique to that game. So maybe this is just totally normal and we just don't really we're paying attention to it because it's Tears of the Kingdom, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, if it was Far Cry 6, I wouldn't be talking about it on All Things Nintendo because that game's not on a Nintendo system.
That's true. They should put Far Cry 3 on Switch. What are they doing?
That is a
Get that
very
thing on
good
there.
game. I'm actually surprised it's not on Switch. Like it
I
seems
know.
like Ubisoft has done a lot of like support for the Switch. But
I was
whatever.
playing Assassin's Creed, but not Black Flag, but the other one. What's the other one?
Rogue?
Rogue. I had never played Rogue, so it was on sale, and I played like the first 30 minutes of it the other day.
I started it like 4 times
Yeah,
and just fell off every single time.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna like continue it or anything. But yeah, let's get Far Cry 3 on there, so I can buy it on sale and play the first 20 minutes.
I'm always surprised that the Assassin's Creed games are on there, but there is a game that I am more surprised is coming to Switch, and that is Mortal Kombat 1.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's only coming to PS5 and Xbox Series X. It's not coming to the last gen Xbox and PlayStation, at least not yet. And it's still somehow coming to Switch. And we got a new trailer during EVO 2023, and we now have 3 more characters on the roster. So we have Reptile, a absolutely amazing addition. Seems like they're doing a really cool take on him too, where like he can transform between the lizard form and like kind of like the green masked ninja form. And there's some really cool like combos you can pull off using that. Havoc and Ashra are 2 of the other new characters. They made their debut in kind of like the 3D era of Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
So people may be less familiar with them unless they grew up on like Deception and Deadly Alliance and Armageddon. But we also learned that Serena is joining as a cameo fighter. And then yeah, seems like they all have some pretty cool moves. You can go see the trailer on their YouTube right now. How are you feeling about Mortal Kombat 1? Are you an MK guy?
No, I really feel nothing. Sorry. I don't think it's bad. I you know what I mean? Like I've never I'm not big into fighting games and I'm not big into Mortal Kombat. Like although I think I was kind of toying around with the idea with Marcus of maybe kind of like checking out the sort of story element of the recent Mortal Kombat games, because that's something it seems like I could like, you know?
Yeah, the story elements are amazing.
Yeah.
The one in MK9 is very, very good, and it retells the story of the first 3 games, but it's almost impossible to get right now.
Right.
Because
yeah.
I think it is backward compatible on Xbox, but it's not sold digitally. And even if you go to Steam, it has a Steam store page, but it's not available for purchase.
Really? That I was just about to Google Mortal Kombat 9 Complete Edition on Steam. Maybe that's what this is. Weird. Okay.
It's very weird. I wonder if what happened was when they put out the Complete Edition, I wonder if they delisted the vanilla version, but the Complete Edition includes like licensed characters like Freddy Krueger. So I'm wondering if maybe they lost the license and therefore lost the ability to sell any version that comes with him.
Right.
And they just were like, well, why do we go through the trouble of relisting the original version? It's like, oh, I'd like to play the original version again. I have the disc somewhere like in my storage, but I have an Xbox Series S. I can't even put it in the disc drive.
I mean, especially considering it like it is canon, right? 9?
Well, I mean, Mortal Kombat
I know the
1
canon's
is
in
rebooting
question.
again.
Well, I'm sorry, what'd you say, Brian?
Mortal Kombat 1 is kind of like another reboot, though.
I know, yes, I know that, but it's like 9, 10, 11, right? And then 1 is kind of like the universe is reset, right? That's my understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
But it does follow the events of 11. So it's like 11, there's like a big reset point that happens at the end of that story. and then 1 follows those events. So it's like if you played 11, you'll be like, okay, so this is why all this is happening. But if you just jump into 1, it'll be like, well, I guess it's just a fresh universe.
Yeah. Let's see. How much is Mortal Kombat 9 on eBay? Let's see. Mortal Kombat 9 on PlayStation 3 loading. Like kind of expensive, actually. Okay. Weird. What a strange thing.
Huh. 30... Yeah, probably because it's not available digitally. Like, that's the thing, is like, we don't have any of the Pokemon games on Switch. Like, I mean, we're going to talk about some of the Pokemon stuff later on in this episode, but like, we don't have like the classic Pokemon games on Switch, and those games are super expensive. And sometimes having them digitally decreases the price a little bit, because if you just want to play the game, you don't want to collect it, you just fire up the modern console version. That's what happened. I remember in particular when Final Fantasy VII was finally made it digitally available back, I guess, like, what was that, like 15 years ago now?
Yeah.
The price, because it was a really expensive game if you wanted to buy the PS1 version, but the price just plummeted on eBay. But now it's like, all right, well, almost every major Zelda game is available on Switch, either through like buying it outright or on Switch Online. But Zelda games are still super expensive on eBay.
Right.
So I think that it's just very hit or miss there. But I would imagine that if Mortal Kombat 9 was made available on digital storefronts, that price would come down pretty substantially.
Okay. Yeah.
But that stuff. Anyway, Mortal Kombat 1 coming to Switch, as well as PS5, Xbox Series X, and PC on September 19th. So right around the corner. Not too long to wait for that one. I probably won't be playing it on Switch, but happy it exists.
Yeah. I wonder if we're like entering this era now with PS5 and Series X, where it's going to go back to sort of the Wii Xbox 360 era again, where it's like the Switch version is going to actually be quite different, but at least there will be a game called Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch shelf. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hope not. And like, talking to Ed Boon, it seemed like it was going to be pretty much the same game. And like, he even said like, yeah, it's going to run at 60, and it's going to 60 frames per second. It's going to be just a really smooth experience and everything. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
So it's cool. The same developer that made that did the Switch version of Mortal Kombat 11. So they know what they're doing, at least, because that game, from what I understand, runs pretty well on Switch. But
this probably just doesn't look as good, but runs well, right? Which is like what you want. Which is what I'm happy to take on Switch. It's like I understand. I will take the lower visual fidelity as long as it plays well.
100%. And it's the sacrifice you make for having that version on the go.
Yeah, that's fine.
But one of the bigger and more kind of unexpected pieces of news, Kyle, was that Red Dead Redemption, which came out in 2010, is coming to Switch.
Hell yeah.
And it was one of those announcements where everybody was like, oh, this is amazing. And then within like 5 minutes, it was just, everybody hates this announcement.
I did see that sort of turn, but I don't understand why it happened. Why are people upset?
So this game, right? It one of the greatest games of its generation. But
love Red Dead Redemption, of course.
Keep in mind that generation is 2 generations ago. So the game is 13 years old, and this port appears to not do anything to improve the game. Plus, it doesn't include multiplayer, and it's being sold for $50.
Okay, and
so that's the crux of the argument of people being like, "This is actually bad."
Right? Yeah, that price. That's pretty rough. Like, I honestly, like, I don't care about multiplayer personally. I know there are people out there that love Red Dead Redemption multiplayer. But yeah, I mean, I would love to have that game on the Switch. I would even maybe consider replaying it. I mean, I played it when it came out. That was the last time I played it, and I think I played the first hour right before Red Dead Redemption 2 came out. But yeah, I don't even mind the lack of upgrades. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as long as I just want a good version on Switch, and if that's what that is, I'll be okay. But yeah, $50, that's pretty rough.
Here's the other part of it. So it was announced for Switch. You all right?
I thought I turned off my mic for that cough. I'm sorry.
You did not turn off the
Oh no, sorry.
So here's the other really bad thing about this announcement. So it's coming to Switch and PS4, and because it's backward compatible on Xbox, so you could just buy the Xbox 360 version if you want to play this on your Xbox One or Xbox Series X. But before you ask, no, there is actually no native PS5 version, and it doesn't get 60 frames per second even if you play it on PS5, which would be the big thing, right? Like you would want it to run really smooth, and you'd want it to run at 60 frames per second. I bet that would do wonders for it. Like I understand like the Switch version, it's going to be a lower technical achievement in terms of like what it's able to perform. But the PS4, why not like give us some version that's like upgraded for that version, right?
Yeah. Yeah, something.
Especially at $50. Like it's not good. And then on an earnings call, IGN actually asked Take-Two's CEO Strauss Zelnick about the price tag, and his quote was, "It's the commercially accurate price." Which, yeah, whatever, dude. Like,
yeah, what does that mean? I don't know.
And then here's his follow up. He said, because it includes the Undead Nightmare DLC, and that made Strauss Zelnick say it is, quote, great value.
Yeah, I mean, there's this ongoing thing where like Nintendo games don't drop in price, right? Like they're always the same price, and they're basically the only people that get away with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like any other company that's still selling Mario Kart at $50 would be like laughed out of the room. And I think Rockstar is probably like we're the one other publisher developer that can probably pull this off, right? Is their thought, it's like us and Nintendo, we're probably the only ones, but they're not, like, you know what I mean? Like GTA 5 goes on sale all the time. I think it was given away on Epic Game Store for a while. Like those games are huge, and like they are good games, but it just still feels like it's too much. I don't know, especially without much added, right? I get it.
Him saying that just adding the DLC for this 13-year-old game makes it a great value. It gives off big, it's one banana, Michael. What could it cost? $10?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It just, I don't like having the hyper rich CEOs of these major companies telling us why we should be grateful that this price point that we're complaining about.
Yeah. 30 feels right for that, honestly.
100%.
Like, even that is like maybe a little high, but like, yeah, 30, even 40, I would be like, yeah, okay, a little high, but all right.
But yeah, so that is that news. It's coming out Switch and PS4 on August 17th, or later if you just do the smart thing and wait for it to go on sale.
Yeah. Well, how did they handle the GTA ports recently? Those were pretty pricey too.
I mean,
right?
well, at launch they were not good.
Well, I actually don't mean that part of it. I mean the pricing. I don't remember.
Let's
like
see
how
what
much
they're
is
currently
the
at
GTA?
on the Grand Theft Auto.
You're looking up on the eShop.
On the
Grand Theft Auto
eShop
trilogy.
I will say that the functionality that you should do. It's asking me for my age, so I'm typing in my birthday. It's currently $60, which again, not great.
3 games, right?
But again,
Vice City 3 and San Andreas.
Yeah, it's 3, Vice City and San Andreas. Again, very old games, so that's even another generation back.
Yeah, that feels like so much. I mean, those are cool games, and you know what? I played a lot of Vice City on my Switch. When that came out, I was like, you know what? I've never beaten Vice City. I'm going to play it on my Switch, and I played it for like 7 or 8 hours. But man, that's pricey. That's pricey.
Yeah, here's my recommendation to you. When Red Dead Redemption, which I don't think it's on the eShop yet. Red Dead. Oh, it is on the eShop.
Oh.
So go to that eShop page, Red Dead Redemption. Hit the little heart when you're logged in. You'll get an email if it goes on sale. That's what I do with all the eShop gems that are brought up here that sound like really cool, but I'm looking them up and they're like, it's $25. I don't really want to drop $25 right now. I'll get an email. It's like, oh, by the way, this game is now like $15 on sale, or it's $10. like I got an email the other day about an R-Type game that I've had my eye on. It's like a remake of the first 2 R-Type games. Remember those?
Of course.
Yeah, the R-Types from like the SNES era were amazing. And so it was like a remake, I guess, of those 2. And I got an email that was on sale, and I'm like, I'll buy that for, it was like $7 or something.
Gosh, I wonder if I unsubscribed from those emails or something, because I still have. What I'll do is I'll just log into the eShop occasionally
And just scroll
and go
down and
look
see.
at my wish list and go down the line and be like, "What's on sale?" But I feel like I haven't gotten an email in a while. Maybe
That's the way to do it. I mean, I have so many games on my wish list, and it's kind of cool to like see, oh, 2 games are on sale. And then, like I said, I think on a past episode here that we were just talking, I will use that as a measuring stick of like, do I really want this game? Because like it's like a $15 game, and it's like, oh, it's on sale for $5 now. I still don't really want it, and that's my cue to remove it, because it's not going to probably get any cheaper than like $5 or $7.50
right,
for like a more expensive game. But moving on, Devolver Digital. They weren't. They joined the Pokemon Company in putting out a showcase this week, but it was not exactly the same kind. It was called Devolver Delayed, and it was basically a parody of the Nintendo Directs, and it featured overly upbeat hosts delivering news that 5 of Devolver's games are being delayed to 2024.
Why not? Make it fun. I like it.
And yeah, so it was very funny, because like they were like, they definitely took on like the same like voice as like the Nintendo Direct people, but like they were like making it very obvious that they were like being like toxically positive in this. They were like, it's been a great year for gaming, and then another one of the hosts was, it's always amazing at Devolver. And then they got more and more like overt and like kind of in your face with the positivity as it went on. And then right. Guess what? It's been delayed. So the games were Pepper Grinder, Skate Story, Angerfoot, and Stick It to the Stickman, getting delayed to 2024. But none of those games are currently slated to come to the Switch.
They're not?
None of those anyway. But I would be surprised if some of them didn't end up getting like ported over to Switch. Right now, I think all of those are currently only PC. Maybe.
What was
Xbox.
The list again? I'm sorry. You
Pepper
said
Grinder, Skate Story, Angerfoot, and Stick It to the Stickman. There is one that I haven't mentioned yet that is coming to the Switch.
I'm surprised Pepper Grinder is not coming to Switch.
I bet it will.
Yeah.
The Plucky Squire is the one that a lot of people are really excited for. That is listed for Switch. Unfortunately, it is also coming in 2024 now. It was originally, all those were originally scheduled for this year. Now 2024. So I mean, I'm most excited for Stick It to the Stickman, Skate Story, and Plucky Squire. But Pepper Grinder also looks really great. And Angerfoot, while not my jam, I think people are gonna enjoy the humor and first person shooter kind of grotesque nature of that game.
Yeah. By the way, just a quick update. I because I was flabbergasted that Pepper Grinder wasn't coming to Switch. It is listed as Switch on its official page.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. Which that game I'm particularly excited about. It's funny. That's probably at the top of my list. Compared to your list.
When I looked at Stick It to the Stickman, I was like, it looks like a fun, like just kind of roguelite brawler. So I'm in on that one. And it reminds me of like the Stickman animations back on like was it Newgrounds?
Yeah.
Those were always fun.
What a throwback. No, Devolver Digital is like genuinely like up there as like one of my favorite publishers, right? Just because like they have a sort of, there's like, it's one of those things that's tough for a publisher to do where it's like it's like a Devolver game when you see it kind of thing, right? But it's like, what defines a Devolver game? I don't really know, but it feels like a Devolver game, and they've had they do good stuff. They've had a lot of games that I like, and they always have cool like indie sort of stuff that just happens to appeal to my taste. So I'm always excited to see what they're doing.
I feel like they really laid like their groundwork for like setting their expected tone with like Hotline Miami. That was like their first like huge hit. So I love Devolver. I think they're one of the better indie publishers. It's like them and Annapurna.
Yeah, like I would put them in sort of in the same zone for sure.
Very different tones in the games they publish, but like still a fairly consistent mark of quality
Yeah.
for all their games. But that wasn't the only delay that we got this week, and we'll end the news portion of the show on this WrestleQuest, which I've actually had Marcus on to chat about a little bit. It was supposed to come out 2 days ago, and then literally hours before it launched, the developer tweeted out that it was getting delayed.
Oh, bummer. Okay, weird.
So basically, they said they found a bug that would cause your save data to get deleted if you were playing across multiple devices. I guess like cloud save errors or something.
Hmm.
So like if I was playing on my Xbox Series S down in my basement, and then I went up to the Xbox One in my living room to continue playing, I guess it would potentially delete the save file as like you were transferring from one game to the other.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or one device to the
not
other. But the good news is it's only a couple of weeks because it's coming out on August 22nd now. So it's a bummer for people who were like, yes, this is the game I'm staying up till midnight to play tonight. And then they're like, yeah, by the way, that's not happening anymore.
bad.
But
Yeah,
August 22nd.
that's a bummer, man. Like, especially for the publisher developer, where it's just like we gotta pull the trigger on this thing. Like, we can't release a game where everyone's save file is gonna like disappear. Like, that's just, we can't, like, we just can't. And
Yeah,
they had to pull that trigger at the last second.
that is a bummer. Before we wrap up this first segment, I did want to give some brief impressions of the new Overwatch 2 season. This isn't something that I've really done a whole lot of, but this is by far the largest update in Overwatch 2's history, and it actually adds a lot of stuff that people have been wanting in the game. First up, there's a new support hero named Ilari, and she has kind of like she's a support character with like a rifle that's kind of like Ana and Ashe combined, where it's like she has like a primary single shot attack that doesn't really pack a whole lot of punch, but has a decent range. And then her secondary is a heal beam, which is very, very useful. And then she also has kind of like a turret, but it's kind of like a combination of like Torbjorn and Symmetra's turrets, but you can stick it on like walls and stuff like that. But it doesn't shoot enemies. Instead, it shoots healing shots at your allies, and it can also be destroyed. So like you have to be very strategic with where you place it. And then she has a move called Outburst, which like can propel her forward in the way she's looking or moving, and it also bounces back any enemies that are nearby. So if like people are kind of crowding you a little bit, you can use that and make some space. And then she has a move called Captive Sun, which is her ultimate, and she floats up in the air and can shoot down this giant, like almost like mini sun, and it starts inflicting like a status ailment on enemies. And if they take enough damage while they have this status ailment, they actually explode. So that's pretty powerful. And then there's also, this is the big one for this update. It is the PvE story missions. So there's Rio de Janeiro, which it starts off on the ground. You're making your way through the city, and then you go up into one of the drop ships and you fight. And there's like a couple of like combat rooms, and then there's a boss battle up there, and then like a big escape sequence. And then there's Toronto, which I've talked about on a previous episode, basically just like moving throughout the city, battling waves of enemies. And then there's Gothenburg, which is a payload escort mission. And then you get to the end and it's wave-based survival with a little bit of tower defense elements to it, where you're like moving turrets around and placing other turrets to kind of help you take on these waves of enemies that are coming in. So those are all very fun. I think Toronto was the longest one that I played. And then there's a few other things. Underworld, it's another like PvE mission, but it's a limited time event where you're rebuilding a robot as enemies come in. It's not as narrative focused, and then you escort the robot through King's Row with like new areas opened up. There's Flashpoint, which is a new PvP mode, and it's kind of like a control point mode where you're basically just trying to control an area until the meter reaches 100%. But instead of that being the end of the round, just another one opens up, and there's 5 control points across the map, and the first team to get to 3 captured wins the match. It's fun. It doesn't revolutionize any of the PvP, but it's a solid addition to the suite of modes. And there's some other stuff that is getting added to this, like hero mastery missions, where it's like you can choose a hero and then go in and take on these challenges in like kind of like a training simulation room. And I didn't get a chance to play it, but I watched some footage and it looked pretty fun. And then a new progression system for the characters where you earn like little cosmetic rewards for them just by using them and completing challenges for them. So pretty substantial update. It's available right now if you are playing Overwatch 2. The new season started yesterday, so you can go check out all that stuff. Kyle, have you played Overwatch at all in the last several years?
No, I haven't. I'm not. But here's the thing: is the fact that there's PVE stuff. It's like the thing that is most likely to get me to check it out.
Well,
I think I played like one round of Overwatch 2, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm not really a big multiplayer guy. I think I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, the PVE is still 4-player co-op, but it's a matchmaking system, so you can just jump right in. You don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to.
Yeah, well, I just like I like fighting AI, right? Like I'm less interested in fighting other people, which is a wild thing to say when it comes to Overwatch, but
no, I get that. Like, and it's kind of like the system, like the way that I discussed this with one of the Call of Duty developers, of like the challenges of adapting a single player experience into a multiplayer experience. And I'm sure it works the other way around, but like essentially when you are playing a single player thing, you are the center, you're the focus, you're the hero of whatever's going on screen. And then when you're used to just being kind of this unstoppable killing machine, essentially, in a single player action or shooter game. And then you go over to multiplayer and it's like, oh, everybody's kind of on equal footing. Some people even maybe on better footing, because like some games reward you with better guns if like you have played for a longer time, or like you've ranked up.
right.
So it's like, yeah, suddenly you're like just another person. You're not like the hero that everybody's like, oh, he's here, we're saved because this guy's here. So I understand that. But if you do want the PvE missions, you will have to pay. Unfortunately, it's not included free in the update. I think it's $15 for the update to give you the PvE missions. Underworld is free, or it's like $40 for like the ultimate premium whatever, which you probably don't need if you're just checking out the PvE missions.
Yeah, that's the stuff I'm interested in for sure.
But yeah, that is available now if you're an Overwatch fan. We are going to take a break, and when we get back, we'll be diving into all the Pokemon news coming out of this week's Pokemon Presents stream. We will be right back. Late last week, the Pokemon Company announced that it would be hosting a Pokemon Presents stream with about 35 minutes worth of announcements. And wouldn't you know it, they followed through on that promise. Kyle, going into this live stream, what were your expectations?
Oh, interesting. They were low. I didn't really have any expectations for any big crazy announcements. I don't know what I want from Pokemon right now. Like it's because was it last year? Like time flies, but it was last year that we had Scarlet and Violet and the other one whose name is escaping me.
Legends
right now.
Arceus,
right? Like that was 2022.
Yeah.
So it's like, with that in mind, I was like, we're not getting a new Pokemon proper announcement. Like they still need to do DLC and stuff like that. So I thought it was going to be more like State of the Union. Here's DLC details and maybe a few other little things, but nothing big. Which is, I kind of feel like I nailed it. Not to pat
really
my
did.
own back.
I saw a lot of people speculating that it might be like time for another wave of remakes. Since
yeah, that's okay. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation. Yeah.
Or maybe more games on the Switch Online catalog. Maybe we were finally going to get like Red, Blue, Yellow on the Switch Online catalog. But I guess we should just clear it up right now. None of that happened.
Right. Yeah.
But normally I would go chronologically on these kind of live streams, but I figured why worry too much about that for something like this. So let's talk about
highlights.
Yeah, let's talk about the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet expansions. That was the thing that they ended with. That was the biggest piece of information. So let's run down what they talk about. Part 1, the Teal Mask. You travel to Kitakame Village, and it has like this ancient folklore that states that it was once attacked by an ogre, but the monster was driven off by 3 legendary Pokemon. So when you arrive in the village, there's a festival going on, and you can take part in the festival, learn more about the local folklore and culture. The best part, however, is the new evolution of Applin, which is named Diplin, and it's just the best. Have you seen this one?
I think so. Is this the really tall one?
No. This is so Applin is like an apple Pokemon, and Diplin is an apple dipped in caramel to kind of coincide with the fact that you're at a festival, which is just an absolutely perfect evolution, like regional evolution.
I'm looking at it now, and it's very slug-like, I gotta say.
But caramel apples are delicious, and that's a great way to give a regional variant to an existing Pokemon.
Yeah, that's fun. I like it.
This expansion, the first part of this expansion, also has a new mini game where you can ride your Pokemon around and pop balloons to earn mochi, which can then be used to boost your Pokemon stats. And then there's also a traveling photographer that will ask for your help in taking photos around the area. So that's part one.
What is that photographer wearing?
It's not Todd Snap, if you were worried about that.
Sorry, Todd.
Part two, the Indigo Disc, you go to Blueberry Academy as an exchange student. You may remember that in Scarlet and Violet, you were at either Naranja or Uva Academy, depending on which version you had.
Right.
You can take new classes and meet new students and then challenge the BB League, which I'm assuming is short for Blueberry League, which is basically the school's Elite Four. And this expansion, this looks like it's the more substantial one. It takes place in this giant terrarium that they've created, and it's full of different biomes, which I'm also hopeful that these areas being kind of more self-contained means that it's not going to run like total garbage. And if you complete all the tasks, you can even teach whichever legendary Pokemon you got based on your version, Koraidon or Moraidon, to fly, which seems like it would be super useful getting around the open world.
Could it not? It could glide.
Could like glide, yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool.
But it seems like this is like, because there's a part in the expansion where it's like, okay, you can teach or in the trailer about this expansion, and like you can teach your Pokemon temporarily to fly in this story, and it's like maybe there's a way to even learn this permanently. So there will be a way to learn it permanently.
Do you remember this is a deep cut, but remember in Skyrim there was a mission where you could get a key that could where you could, what is it called, where you pick the lock. It was an unbreakable lock pick.
Mm-hmm.
And what you did is you got it for like a mission, but then you had to return it at the end of the mission. What everyone did is they just never completed that mission, so they just had an unbreakable lockpick with them the whole game. So that's what people are going to do here, is what I'm saying.
That is very smart, actually.
Yeah.
But no, I don't remember that mission. But I think that there's going to be a way that, like, once you complete this quest, it'll be like, oh yeah, now he can fly forever.
Yeah. They're not going to say, ooh, maybe you can have it forever. It's like, that's you confirming you can have it forever, you guys.
This expansion also has the League Club, where you can decorate your Pokeballs, change your throwing style, and then invite trainers to battle. And then we also got to look at 2 new Paradox Pokemon, special versions of Cobalion, and then the one you were talking about, Raikou, which is the legendary like saber-toothed tiger from Gen 2, but now it's like a Brontosaurus. Is that what dinosaur that would have been? Where it's like a real tall, it's like, it looks like the tall necks from Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, it's very giraffe-like because they're yellow. Well, I mean, I guess giraffes are orange, but like it kind of looks giraffe-ish. So yeah, it's cool. I like it. It's weird.
And then I guess probably the biggest news out of this segment was the release date for the first of the 2 expansions. So the Teal Mask comes out September 13th. So that's right around the corner. And then the Indigo Disc, they just kind of reaffirmed that it's coming this winter. So did you get a chance to watch these trailers at all? Or like, how are you feeling about these expansions?
Much like Mortal Kombat, I feel basically nothing.
Wow. And I know you're a Pokemon guy.
I know. I didn't beat Scarlet and Violet despite enjoying them. Like, I was like, this is the most fun I've had with Pokemon in a long time. And I think I got like 60% through the game. And like, I liked it. I really liked it. But I'm not going to play the DLC. I'd sooner go back and try to finish the game. But I'm glad it exists for people who are excited about it.
Okay. If it was like Pokemon, I don't know what color they would go with, but like basically like Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon version that had all this stuff like they used to do, where it would be like they would just release like ultimate versions of the game like a year or 2 later. Would that be more enticing than getting an expansion?
No, I'd rather DLC exist, right? Like, I was always a little turned off by those versions, because it's like, like, you know, it's like, oh, the best version of the game comes out later, but you've already played it. So if you want to play the best version of the game and see the new stuff, you have to replay the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'd rather just have DLC where I can take my character that I've invested a lot of time in and my team of Pokemon that I invested a lot of time in and take them to go see the new stuff. I think that's a much better solution.
100%. It's like how, Street Fighter, it's like, all right, how many versions of Street Fighter 2 am I supposed to buy here? And it's like, no, now I can just buy the DLC characters.
But yeah, even that's a little different because at least Street Fighter is like, you know, it's not like a RPG where you have like a team, you know, like it's so I never liked that sort of approach to Pokemon. I understand it's sort of why it worked so well in a different era, but once they had the option to add new content online, it's like all right, we don't need to do Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon anymore. Let's just do DLC, which is what they're doing, which is great.
Sure. So let's talk about probably the second biggest news out of this stream. And it was also Scarlet and Violet related because you can now get Mew in your game. And then eventually you'll be able to get Mewtwo.
Cool.
So to get Mew right now, you go into the mystery gift menu in Scarlet and Violet and enter the code GETYOURMEW, all one word. And the Mew will have a random Terra type, nature, and moves, which I like that because it's not like everybody's going to have the same Mew. And then starting on September 1st, you can take your Mew and whatever other Pokemon you want into Terra Raid battles against 7-star Mewtwo battles, which I don't know if you've done any of the Terra Raid battles. The 7-star the 7-star raid battles are very challenging. But if you defeat the Mewtwo, you have the ability to catch them, which is, that's the key right there, right?
Right.
They also teased that something special will happen if you bring your Mew into the battles against Mewtwo. I don't know if there's going to be some cool interaction. I don't think the technology of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet will support any kind of special interaction, but like the reveal trailer showed like Mew and Mewtwo battling it out while like some other Pokemon from like the Paldea region kind of watched. But like, I don't know what something special could be if you bring your Mew into the battles. It'll probably just be like
maybe an in-depth conversation about the nature of friendship.
Very well could be. And have you seen that meme where it's like Mewtwo saying something really profound and Mew just going Mew, and then Mewtwo's like, "You are wise beyond your years," or something like that.
I mean, that's the Pokemon movie, right? I mean,
it really is.
Like, oh man, I remember I went with a family friend to go see the Pokemon movie with my younger sister and her friend. So it's like a lot of kids, right? And the mother of the friend joined us. And in that movie, in theaters, the intro, I don't know if you remember this, was just a short that was just the Pokemon. It didn't have any humans in it. So it was like Pokemon just all saying their name, right? Like there was no dialogue. And I remember my family friend's mother like leaning over and being like, "Is this what the whole movie is gonna be? Like there's no talking, it's just these creatures like saying their name for an hour and a half." And I was just like, honestly, I don't know. Let's see what happens next.
She was like, "This is gonna be a long hour and a half."
Yeah, this is gonna be a killer nap, is what she was thinking.
So if you want Mew, you can get your Mew anytime between now and September 18th, and then the Mewtwo raids run from September 1st through September 17th. So mark those on your calendar, or just log into Scarlet and Violet now and enter that code to get your Mew.
Giving away that Mew.
Giving it away. We might as well wrap up the Scarlet and Violet talk with kind of the other announcements surrounding this generation. So there's a new animated shorts series hitting YouTube on September 6th called Paldean Wilds, and it's going to focus on 3 Academy students learning about Pokemon in the Paldea region. All right, fair enough. And then Pokemon Go is also getting its first Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet next month, and all we know right now is that the starters are joining, but I would actually be surprised if they didn't follow with more either shortly after or at the same time as those. Detective Pikachu Returns also got a new trailer, and I don't really know if there's like much to say about this. Did you see this trailer?
I haven't watched a trailer, but it is a game that my family is excited about. They like the original game quite a lot.
Oh, really? I thought it was stemming from the movie, not so much the original game.
No, yeah, it's the game. The movie.
I feel like a lot of people forgot that the original game exists, and everybody's just like, oh yeah, there was a movie like that.
Yeah.
But we got a new look at Tim Goodman, who is not played by Justice Smith in the games like he was in the movie. We
It's
also
like,
got
what Todd Snap, like Tim Goodman. It's like their last names are like, this is who I am as a
and what is their
character.
occupation, which is, I guess, how
I guess
last names came into
yeah, I guess
existence
that's actually accurate. I was gonna joke about it, but it's like, well, hold on a second.
They also had other characters from the first game, like Rachel. But this game's kind of sneaking up on us. This is a very busy October, and this comes out to October 6th, so less than 2 months away. And you seem like you're pretty into it.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't know if I'll play it, honestly, but I'm near people who are excited about it. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, there were other announcements.
By the way, I'm sorry. I feel like this whole episode, you're like, "What do you think of that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't care."
Yeah, thanks for being so enthusiastic, Kyle.
I'm sorry. I'm lacking enthusiasm about all this stuff. It's just the how it goes sometimes.
Well, let's just keep this lack of enthusiasm rolling. We also got updates for like the mobile games. So Pokemon Masters got some new stuff. I think it was Scarlet and Violet related. Pokemon Cafe Remix got some kind of Jigglypuff thing. I think. I don't know. I didn't really make any notes for that one. And,
yeah.
But then we'll end on this one in terms of like the actual announcements, because it was one of my favorites. It was one that was, I think, a lot of people's favorites. It's the nostalgia angle. Mm-hmm. Nintendo Switch Online added 2 games from Pokemon. They're out right now. So in the Game Boy catalog, which is part of the base subscription, you can now play the Pokemon trading card game for Game Boy Color, which I freaking love. That's an amazing
that's
game.
A big one for you?
Oh, man. I played the crap out of that. And then, like, I actually found my old cartridge. Probably, like, oh, man, it was probably 10 years ago now at this point. But I remember being like, oh, let me fire this up and just, like, play it. It was like I was in New York for my birthday. And I was just like, I'm going to go up to New York by myself for my birthday and just, like, kind of hang out, do stuff in New York. And it rained the entire weekend. And like, I woke up one morning, I was like, I don't feel like wandering around in the rain. So I'm just going to fire this up and play like, an hour or something like that. And I ended up beating it over the weekend because it was so good. And it holds up. I mean, it's not as deep as like a standard Pokemon RPG, but I love the Pokemon trading card game on Game Boy. And it's mostly like the base set with, I think, some of like maybe the second set, but yeah, it's very, very good. I highly recommend it. It's structured like an RPG.
It also teaches you the basics of the game, right?
It
does. The card game. See, yeah, that's nice, because I remember my kid was getting into Pokemon cards. I never played the card game, and we sat down. I was like, well, let's try to learn this. You and me, we can play. And like, we just couldn't do it. Like, we couldn't get our brains around it. But I think if I were to like sit down and play this, which is admittedly an older game, but just something to sort of structure the rules and show me how things work, I would be much better off. Like, I feel like that's probably the best tutorial for the card game ever, right?
I was just thinking how amazing it would be to get an updated version of this. I know there's Pokemon Trading Card Game Live, which actually might be the best tutorial, given that it has all the updated rules and everything.
That's a good point.
And it's free to play, so like, you can just fire that up. But Pokemon Trading Card Game on Game Boy, it's just so straightforward. It's an RPG, so like it's structured very similar to like the Red and Blue style of Pokemon games, where you're going around to like different gyms and battling, but you're just using Pokemon trading card games instead of like actual Pokemon. And it's just a great time. And I would love a modern version of that with like all the new cards and all the new expansions and everything. That would be so much fun. That's honestly, like, I would rather have that than a lot of remakes that I have like put forward as like, oh, it'd be so cool if they did this. Yeah. Now that I'm thinking of it, like, that might be like one of my like dream pie in the sky announcements.
Is a new proper Pokemon trading card, like narrative RPG game, right?
Yeah, like we got a new Pokemon Snap, which I think is maybe more niche than, I mean, maybe not, because Pokemon Snap was kind of like a casual appeal game, whereas Pokemon Trading Card Game for Game Boy was like, it was wide appealing, but it was also like kind of a hidden gem, because a lot of people were just...
Interesting question. Like, what sold more? I would put my money on Pokemon Snap, honestly.
Probably, because it was an N64 game. It was such a novelty to have like Pokemon in 3D. Like I remember that was one of the big things was like, oh wow, like they almost look like they do in the anime. And that was like such a
Yeah.
cool thing.
All right. Pokemon Snap sold 1.5 million copies
That's lower than I thought
in
it would.
1999. I mean, this is a different era, right? I'm gonna see if I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but I'm curious with it. I'll see if I can look while we're still chatting. I'm gonna Google it and see if I can find out how
I mean, you
many.
could probably find it on the Wikipedia page for like
Yeah.
at least a ballpark number for the Pokemon trading card game and Game Boy for Game Boy. Like I keep having to justify it or like qualify it in that way for Game Boy because I don't want people to like think I'm just talking about the Pokemon trading card game proper. And also, there's Pokemon trading card game live on your iPhone. But
Okay, so it looks like trading card game may have sold more.
you also have to imagine that the user base on Game Boy is a little bit higher and also more geared towards Pokemon. So that might be it. But
So this is
yeah, like
just before we move on, like this is all cursory Wikipedia research and grain of salt. Who knows how accurate this is, and we might be missing information. But according to Wikipedia, Pokemon Snap sold about 1.5 million copies, and then the trading card Game Boy game sold 1.5 million copies in North America, and then another 600,000 in Japan.
nice.
So,
Okay.
but who knows? Like again, we're missing numbers, etc. But yeah, it seems like yeah, the trading card game might have been like the bigger hit going by sort of commercial standards.
But yeah,
Rather than
like deck
critical
builders
standards.
are all the rage now. So why not? Why not try it again?
Yeah, do it.
I would love that. And like
I
just
dare
give us
you,
like
Game Freak.
I mean, it was a really great game, in case you couldn't tell by my gushing over it to this point. But we also got Pokemon Stadium, which is in the N64 catalog. Pokemon Stadium 2, excuse me, which is in the N64 catalog. And that is included with the expansion pack subscription level for Nintendo Switch Online. So
Cool.
did you ever play Pokemon Stadium 2? I only played the first one growing up.
I think I did. It was like one of those, like I rented a lot of N64 games. Like that was the prime rent a N64 game every weekend, right? Because like I had the console, and then Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, and then almost everything else I played for a long time was just rentals. So that be like with that in mind, like I rented Pokemon Stadium 2 quite a bit, but it was more like my siblings were playing it than me. So it's like I don't really have a lot of specific memories of it necessarily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. I never checked it out. I owned Pokemon Stadium 1, but just never. I also stopped playing Pokemon for a long time after Gen 1 was over because I was like, I don't want to learn 100 new creatures. Like, I don't want to have to, like, memorize, like, all these things. I was so into Gen 1. I didn't want to let go of that. So I just kept playing, and I didn't get back into it until Fire Red, Leaf Green because I was like, oh, well, that's a great way to just have, like, a modernized version of my favorite games.
Yeah.
And then like as far as like all new mainline games, I didn't get back into it again until XY. So I was out for
honestly,
a while.
XY is like probably the Pokemon game I had played the most up to that point, right? Like
Yeah.
all the other ones I dabbled, played about half, got 6 or so gyms, and I was on the review for XY at the time, which was a factor, but I really got into that one and like played it and beat it and really had a good time.
Yeah, it's a good one. I really enjoyed that one a lot. But how did you feel about this Pokemon Presents overall? Do you think like this was even a necessary thing to have?
Yeah, I don't know. Necessary, what does that really mean, I guess? Sure, like give us an update. Let us know what's going on in the world of Pokemon every couple of months. And then, you just have to sort of rein in your expectations. You can't expect every one of these to be, the revelation that some of the bigger ones are. I guess I want them to exist even if they don't have any big announcements, because it's fun to have a little presentation, based on a franchise I like. But yeah, overall, if we're gonna grade it, like C plus, something like that.
Yeah, I'd probably be on the C range just because I don't know, like everybody was expecting or wanting either remakes of some kind. I think a lot of people were saying like, oh, maybe this is when we get like Let's Go Johto or something like that, or let's get like Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, or even like in the Game Boy Advance catalog, like Fire Red, Leaf Green, or I don't know, anything other than like spin-off titles, because that's all we've gotten in the Pokemon series. Like we have Pokemon Snap in the N64 catalog, we have both Pokemon Stadium games. It's like, all right, can we get the mainline games on those?
They're weirdly so precious about those, and then they put them on 3DS, but I don't know, it felt late, or like, I don't know. I like, why not? Why do they, are they, maybe they just like to look forward and don't like to look back, but they did put Stadium on there. Yeah, I mean, the biggest announcement to me, the biggest surprise was Pokemon trading card game, because it was like, I just kind of thought that was dead, right? Like that they had kind of would ignore it forever. Like
I think it was on 3DS as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Was it? Okay, then yeah, it feels like one of those games. Like it's the same reaction I had to Super Mario RPG remake earlier this year, where I was kind of like, I just assumed Nintendo would sooner never think about that game again. Like they just don't care. It's not even that they think it's bad. It's like, we've moved on. Play Paper Mario if you want a Mario
Paper
RPG.
Mario or Mario and Luigi.
Yeah,
like that.
Which, well, that's a whole thing because that studio is now defunct and stuff. But like, so when the trading card game, it's like, yeah, that's on Switch. I was like, that one? Oh, okay. I assumed you guys forgotten that existed, but great, cool, happy to see that there.
I saw a lot of enthusiasm for it though, so I'm hoping that this is the spark that lights the fire that signals the revolution. Kyle, Pokemon trading card game RPG revival, please.
But new Pokemon Snap's sort of reception is not doing it any favors, I feel like. Not that it was not a bad game at all. It was just people were kind of like, they're like, oh, I know I said I wanted that, but I wasn't actually going to play it. I didn't know you guys were taking me seriously.
I wonder what that sold as I punched my mic by mistake.
Yeah, let's see what that is. Maybe it was great. Maybe it just feels like it came out and everyone kind of shrugged their shoulders.
Well, it has a 79 on Metacritic, which isn't awful. That's pretty good, actually.
Ooh, okay. 2.4 million copies in America. So, but that's not great.
That's as of December 2021.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, that's better than either Pokemon Stadium 2 or Pokemon trading card game.
But that's
Pokemon Snap or Pokemon.
We're in a different era though. Like crossing the 1 million threshold is not the sort of high bar of success that it used to be, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe actually that is a total success and they're very happy with that. I don't know. It just felt like when the game came out, everyone was just kind of like, yeah, it's fine, and then moved on.
But hey, they did content updates for that and everything.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it's doing Pokemon trading card game a favor then. Maybe that is a incentive.
I'm just saying, you've got a few years before we probably have a Gen 10. Could sneak in a Pokemon trading card game RPG.
Do it, Nintendo.
All right, Kyle, that's all we're going to talk about with this Pokemon Presents stream. We're going to take our final break of the show, and when we get back, we're going to take a look back at The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, which turned 30 years old this week. We will be right back. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is viewed by many as one of the greatest games in the Game Boy library, and many argue it deserves a place near the top of any Zelda ranking. That game turned 30 years old this week, so Kyle, I want to take a brief look back at the development history to round out this week's episode. What was your first experience with Link's Awakening?
Let's see. I played a lot of it. I got my hands on a copy somehow when I was pretty young. I believe I had played. Yes. I had played Ocarina of Time at that point because that was my first Zelda game, and it was such a monumental thing for me that I went back and was like, well, I am late to this franchise. I gotta go see what I missed, right? And I remember going on a family vacation and taking it with me and just getting totally absorbed into it, even though I was many years late to it. And I actually didn't finish it, but I did beat the remake that came out a couple years ago. But I really like Link's Awakening. It's like, I know a lot of people like to point to Majora's Mask, but I still think Link's Awakening might be the weirdest Zelda game. I talked to Tezuka, I think at an E3 once, in depth about it, and ended up writing like a piece for Game Informer about it. And like, he talked a lot about like Twin Peaks inspiration, which I think is a super fun element of that game, is like how important Twin Peaks is to its like sort of storytelling. It's a really charming and lovely game, and also like a technical powerhouse considering what platform it was on. The fact that they got a fully featured Zelda game on the Game Boy is really impressive. So I have a lot of affection for Link's Awakening. I really like Link's Awakening a lot.
Well, that's actually how it started development. Was, it famously started as an unsanctioned after-hours project by Nintendo, specifically programmer Kazuaki Morita, and they basically just started doing it for fun because they wanted to test the limits of their ability to create a Zelda-like game on the Game Boy, because they're like, could we make this work on this limited platform?
I mean, I think even, and maybe you have the notes in front of you, which maybe are even based on partly on that feature I wrote, but I think it even started as a Link Between Worlds port.
Link to the Past.
I'm sorry, you're right. Link to the Past port, right?
Yeah, so Link to the Past came out on Super Nintendo in 1991, and Takashi Tezuka, as you had mentioned, he was the director of Link to the Past. He decided, like, I kind of want to make a Zelda game for Game Boy, and that was his original idea, was port A Link to the Past to Game Boy. But then it was eventually decided to make it an all-original game once they kind of started, like, thinking about ideas for it, and then Tezuka signed on to direct this one as well. So he's... I do like the rapid-fire interview that we did with Takashi Tezuka at E3 2019. Me and Ben Hansen were there for that, and... basically Hansen read off all of like Tezuka's credits, like, you're the director of Super Mario World, you're the director of Yoshi's Island, you're the director of Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and he just kept going and going and going, and he just kept going, yes, 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 and he's like, Miyamoto who?
Yeah, I mean, truly, yeah. Speaking of those rapid fire questions, like, genuinely, we've done like literally at this point thousands of those at this point, many of which I was not involved in during my when I wasn't here for a couple of years. But one of my favorites, period, is when we interviewed Aonuma and Miyamoto, and I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but we were like, is it weird that Kirby has a cameo in Link's Awakening? And they were very seriously looked at each other and were like, no, that's fine, that's good, yeah.
Yeah,
and I just loved that reaction of like, we were like, it's weird, right? And they're like, no, it is actually quite normal that Kirby appears in Link's Awakening. Why are you asking us this question?
So I was reading, for a lot of this research, I was reading an Iwata Asks interview from 2009, and Tezuka called the development unrestrained, and that they just started adding unauthorized cameos of characters like Mario and Kirby.
Different era, man. They didn't have to seek approvals for that stuff. It was great.
Yeah, well, Iwata even said, like, we always talk in like these like TV, like, you look back at like TV shows from like the 80s or 90s, like, oh, you could never make that TV show today with how everything is, and like you could never like say that type of stuff on TV in 2023. Iwata was literally like, I don't think you could make a game like this in this style today, and that was in 2009. And Tezuka's like, yeah, probably not.
Yeah, there's just too many layers of approvals. Like, you throw Kirby in there, it's like, well, hold on, now we gotta call Mr. Kirby and make sure that you have the right model, and yada yada.
So Tezuka did say that they asked for permission for Kirby, but it was probably still a surprise for most people at HAL, because it only went to like the upper people. Probably, I would imagine, like Sakurai and Iwata were the ones that like were asked. And Iwata was at HAL during those times, and he said that because Kirby was such a new character in that era, that it felt like a huge honor to him to have Kirby appear in a Zelda game, because Zelda was like a prestige franchise already at that point. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And Tezuka kind of said he wanted Link's Awakening to feel more like a spin-off than a mainline game, which is why he told Kensuke Tanabe, who was writing the story, like kind of the bigger beats, to write the story without the use of Princess Zelda, the Triforce, or Hyrule. And then the ball eventually started rolling on an island with an egg on top of the mountain. And then Tezuka said that it started feeling like he was making a Zelda parody game instead of an actual Zelda game, which was kind of an interesting revelation, it seemed like. Or he's just like, I don't know if like this is actually a Zelda game, or are we just making fun of Zelda?
Right, yeah. I mean, that's what I like about it, though, because it also... it's not to spoil the end of Link's Awakening, fast forward ahead if you don't want to hear about this, but it is kind of like it was all a dream at the
Yeah.
end, but it kind of toes this like, or it toes this line of like, but maybe it wasn't, right? And I feel like that's key of like, it's like, oh, what a weird adventure I had that might have actually happened, but I'm not really sure, and I really love that about it.
So Toshihiko Nakago, are you familiar with that name?
No, not off the top of my head. No.
He is the president of SRD, which has worked with Nintendo on a lot of projects, a lot of early Zelda and Mario titles. Satoru Iwata once called him, Miyamoto, and Tezuka the golden triangle of developers in like terms of like the success of Nintendo games. So like he was held in pretty high regard. I mean, he's still with SRD. And he actually said that the cameos are probably to blame on a programmer at SRD who was working on Link's Awakening with Nintendo. He was just doing whatever he wanted. So he was just like, I'm going to add Chain Chomp from Mario as a character that you like walk around with. And then he also added Goombas and Piranha Plants and then like a Yoshi doll and Mario and Luigi.
Yeah, all good decisions. Like,
yeah.
Make it weird,
So you know who else worked on this game?
The director of Twin Peaks, whose name is escaping me right now. Why can't I think
David Lynch?
David Lynch, thank you.
David Lynch did not work on this, but Yoshiaki Koizumi, who you may know for his work on Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. He joined the team after the initial phases to help with the story. And he was the one that came up with the idea of it being kind of like a dreamlike sequence or a dreamlike experience with a bunch of strange characters. And basically the goal was to have every character be suspicious or act suspicious. And this is where kind of the idea of drawing inspiration from Twin Peaks, as you had mentioned. And it's just so fun to have like American media referenced by Nintendo because like, I don't know, like it's so rare that Nintendo will even say like, yeah, we looked outward for inspiration. Because usually they're like, oh yeah, we had these ideas, and like if you ever ask,
the closest we get now is like, I think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is like without a doubt heavily inspired by Princess Mononoke. Like there's so many lines to draw between that film and those two games, and like the most you can get out of Nintendo is like, we looked at anime.
Yeah, they never reference specific things anymore.
Yes, yeah.
That's why it's so fun to hear them say that, especially somebody like Takashi Tezuka, who's like, maybe number 2 to Shigeru Miyamoto in terms of like Nintendo creative superstars.
Yeah.
So they asked, here's a fun thing. So you were on here for the Wind Waker retrospective where I was talking about like how developers would come and go, and like Aonuma was like stuck in the he was like stuck in the office for so long. The only reason he knew that it was turning to winter was because people were showing up in winter jackets. He was just like, oh, I guess it's cold outside now, because he had not been outside for so long. Iwata asked Tezuka if they were able to create Link's Awakening without any detours, and when Tezuka said that things went pretty well and there were no like major roadblocks or detours, Iwata said, quote, I thought it was a tradition for working on a Zelda title for it to turn into kind of an exercise in suffering.
Oh no, we don't want that. I mean, we love Zelda, but don't suffer to make Zelda for us.
And then Tezuka said, I remember it was fun working on it, and when it was over, I remember us talking to each other about how fun it was. So that's nice.
Okay. Good.
So, you had a lot of people involved with this. We had Kensuke Tanabe, we had Yoshiaki Koizumi, we have Takashi Tezuka. You know who was not involved with this?
David Lynch.
Not David Lynch, but not Shigeru Miyamoto either. Tezuka said that he wasn't involved in the day-to-day development, saying, quote, I think he was busy with something and didn't pay us much attention. And then Tezuka also said, I do hear lots of Nintendo Entertainment analysis and development staff members say, not just you guys, but also say that he's busy and he doesn't pay them much mind. Miyamoto-san's busy right now and won't pay us any attention. At any given time, Miyamoto-san tends to have something that he gives priority above everything else. When he's absorbed in that, he basically lets everything else go.
Yeah, I mean it's always tough to know what it's like to work with Miyamoto. I mean, we always are trying to find out more, but it does seem like he's so future focused that like the people who are working on something that's like actively needs to be released within the year or two, it's like he'll check in and give feedback and stuff, but for the most part he's like 5 years ahead of all of us. You know what I mean? Like he's like working on the next hardware and stuff like that when people are like, oh yeah, we got to get this new Zelda game out. So that makes sense.
And I did look back at some interviews that I've done recently, and I'm bringing up an interview I did with Koji Kondo and Shigeru Miyamoto earlier this year. But I was also looking back at an interview I did with Eiji Aonuma at E3 2019, and I was like, "What's it like collaborating with Shigeru Miyamoto on all these games and everything?" And he was just like, even after working with him at this point for like almost 30 years, it's still wild to me that like I can say that like I collaborate with him. Like I'm still like so excited. Like he's like, I never think of it as collaboration, but when you put it that way, maybe I actually am collaborating with him. That's really exciting to think about. Like he never like thought of it as like, oh yeah, we collaborate. He was like, no, he's my boss and he tells me what to do and I do it. Like,
I mean, yeah, you can be Eiji Aonuma, Mr. Zelda, but if Shigeru Miyamoto walks up to you and says something to you, it's like, what can you do but not just accept it and be like, yes, this is how things are. This is the man who figured out how to make video games.
Basically, yeah. So I did ask Koji Kondo and Shigeru Miyamoto how their collaborative relationship has evolved over the last almost 40 years. And Koji Kondo said, this is earlier this year as a part of the media for Super Mario Brothers movie. He said, when I entered Nintendo, it's been 38 years. We've maintained this distance where it's not too close and not too far. And then Shigeru Miyamoto chimed in with, when there's work on the Mario series, I would go to Kondo-san and say, can you write one track to this and make requests like that? There's obviously no guidance that I can provide in terms of music to Mr. Kondo, but I am in a position where I can perhaps provide creative guidance to him. And so over the years, what we really talked about is that when we're creating music for games, let's create music that can only be possible in games. And then, he goes on and on like that. And then he
unless
said,
it's banjo. We know Miyamoto loves himself some banjo.
And then he said, the idea creation process is the responsibility of the game designer. And likewise, these kind of creative ideas need to come from the sound designer as well. That's been something I've been kind of encouraging Mr. Kondo to do, but I don't know. Sometimes he doesn't speak up. So, and he kind of trailed off, and then Koji Kondo interrupted with, that's not true.
That's good.
And then, and then Shigeru Miyamoto said, but he's got a career of almost 40 years. So the idea of creating something that is uniquely Nintendo comes naturally to him now. And then, he said, I think from time to time, Mr. Miyamoto has continually reminded me that that's what we're doing. And I've been able to really focus on those areas. And it's been something that I've really enjoyed doing for all that time. So it sounds like Miyamoto recognizes that like the brilliance that is around him, and he tries to give them kind of like the ability to chime in with that. And like, it seems like he does that a lot with Zelda now, where it's just like, yeah, that's Eiji Aonuma's realm at this point. Like, I know that even in this game, even in Link's Awakening, to kind of circle back here, Miyamoto didn't really have any like oversight, even though he's listed as a producer, but he did come in during QA and tested out the game. And then he gave some apparently very, very important changes that got made.
Link needs a sword, stuff like that. Yeah.
So Tezuka later on in this Iwata Asks called the development of Link's Awakening their after school club, which I thought was kind of charming because like it was very much an after school club at first, and then it eventually evolved into being something that they were actually working on during work hours. So I guess, how do you view the legacy of Link's Awakening in 2023?
It's like the weirdo entry in Zelda, like, but well liked, right? Like it's a good example of a game that steps outside of the normal sort of tone of the franchise in which it exists, but still is like very successful as a Zelda game, which you could say the same of Breath of the Wild and eventually Tears of the Kingdom as well. But I do think its legacy is like, that's the weird one, especially with the remake now too. Like it looks nothing like any other Zelda game. If you're like a young player, even now, if you look at the library of Zelda games that are available to you on Switch that are more contemporary. Like Link's Awakening stands out as the weird one that looks like you're
Yeah.
playing with like toys. And that's what I like about it. It's cool for that reason, you know?
There were some weird elements in things like Link to the Past, like, he turns into a bunny and stuff like that. But like, I feel like Link's Awakening is where they learned that, like, oh, people like the weird stuff. They don't just put up with it because it's in a really great game. Like, they actively like it. And I think that's why they felt so galvanized going into the N64 era. And, Eiji Aonuma called it the first Zelda game with a true narrative. And, like, the characters actually felt like real characters, not just like people who you were supposed to go up and like, oh, they'll tell me something that I need to know to pass on to the next quest.
Yeah, I
And
think that's fair. Like, you have that dad that calls you, or you can call for tips, but like if you try to go visit him in person, he's like too shy and doesn't want to talk to you. Like weird stuff like that. The tingles of the Zelda universe, so to speak, like wouldn't exist without Link's Awakening sort of going first to be like, yeah, no, we can do weird stuff. It's cool. Players like it.
I mean, a lot of the Majora's Mask characters wouldn't exist without Link's Awakening.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's also I think this is the first, like, the heaviest emphasis they had on music to this point, which
well, I mean, I don't know. Link Between Worlds was like
Link to the Past. You keep saying Link Between
Why
Worlds,
do I
Kyle.
keep saying that? I don't know
because it's a very good game as well, and also a direct sequel.
But yeah, I Link to the. I think that was very. I see what you're saying because of the windfish, and it's like you're collecting instruments. And yeah,
that obviously carried forward. Like, Ocarina of Time, very, very music focused. Wind Waker, very music focused. And there's a lot of games that have music elements following Link's Awakening. And I can tell you that when I was interviewing Aonuma at E3 2019, he consistently told me that Link's Awakening, not A Link to the Past, was his biggest inspiration for Ocarina of Time.
Interesting.
I kept trying to circle the conversation back to A Link to the Past, and he like kept circling it back to Link's Awakening. And I was like, and I was just like, well, what about Link to the Past? And he like had a moment where he was just like, why are you asking me about this game? Like, I didn't work on A Link to the Past. I'm like, yeah, I just want to know the inspiration. He's like, well, Link's Awakening was by far the biggest inspiration. Was kind of like his hammer home point that he had.
That's cool.
And then the remake, as you have alluded to, came out in 2019. That kind of changed a lot of the visuals. I think the visuals have been very polarizing. They especially were at first. I think a lot of people have come around to it. Very similar to A Link Between Worlds when that came out at first. Like, everybody's like, oh, this is so ugly. And then now everybody pretty much loves it.
Who are these people? Get out of here.
Also, Wind Waker, I mean, it's the Zelda cycle. It's the basically the inverted Sonic cycle, where at first people are like, I don't like these changes. And then by the time they, like, a few years past, they're like, that's the greatest change that was ever made in video games.
Yeah, I love the way the remake looks. I think it looks amazing.
It looks very, very unique, and I like that a lot. When I spoke to Aonuma about the remake, he said, Link's Awakening was a game I was not involved with the development. I was just playing it as one player, he said. And then he said it left a very strong impression. The original Game Boy version was released at the time, 26 years ago. So it's a little bit hard to get your hands on it these days. So I've always wanted to reimagine it. So, like, I was talking to him about on the topic of like remakes and remasters in the Zelda series. And that was when I got the quote from him that a version of Skyward Sword that doesn't use motion controls might be close to impossible, which, has since been released in the real world. And then on one of the big features that the remake added was kind of this dungeon creation tool. And he said, when we were thinking about this game, we always wanted to incorporate something where the player could do some kind of arranging of their own. And what we came up with was the dungeon arranging. Link's Awakening was the perfect fit for that, especially with the dungeons. So we wanted to incorporate that with this new reimagined game. So I know that was kind of maybe the less exciting part of that game. Like, people are like, oh, is it going to be like Zelda Maker? And it's like, no, you're just kind of choosing which rooms you want to put in the game, not like actually designing dungeons.
Yeah, there wasn't much to that. I didn't really engage with that too much.
Yeah, but anything else on Link's Awakening before we wrap up here, Kyle?
Great game. Shout out to Oracle of Season and Ages, which released on the Switch Online service recently. I've been playing them for the first time. Like, it's one of those I dabbled with occasionally, but actually committed this time on the most recent release. And that's very much a Link's Awakening sequel, those two games. More so even than the follow-up. More so than like Ocarina of Time, which came out beforehand. But I finished Seasons recently, and it was a nice throwback to like a Link's Awakening-esque Zelda game. It was a good time. I enjoyed playing it.
By the way, the biggest improvement I will say for the remake for Link's Awakening is that because there's so many more buttons, you don't have to unequip the sword because you have to use other items. Like it was like you could only equip like the sword or the shield because there's only 2 face buttons on a Game Boy. So it's like, all right, well, now that we have a Switch that has 4 face buttons and triggers and shoulder buttons, it's like now there's a way that you can just always have your sword and shield equipped, and then you can equip other items to the other buttons, and that is a huge improvement. That was my biggest annoyance with Link's Awakening.
And I just experienced it again with Oracle of Seasons. I'm sure a lot of people play this way. I just never unequip the sword.
Yeah.
So I've just always got, just one open spot, and it's actually extra annoying on Switch because there are other buttons there, right? Like they exist, they're on the controller, but they're not compatible with the game, if that makes sense. So it feels like, can't I put some more items on? It's like, nope, that's not how this works. You're emulating the Game Boy game, and I'm like, all right, I get it.
So if you haven't checked out Link's Awakening, there are 2 options for you on Switch. One is the original Game Boy version, which is on the Switch Online catalog, and the other is the remake that came out in 2019. I don't know if that's been on sale recently. Nintendo games don't typically go on sale, but I think remakes go on sale a little bit more frequently than like all original games. So
yeah, there's also lucky. What's it called? It's like a little handheld that I still see in stock at like Targets and stuff. Do you know what I'm talking about? It has Zelda, the NES game, I think, on there, and it also has Link's Awakening.
Oh, it has Link's Awakening? I thought it was only the original Zelda.
What is that thing called? Do you remember?
It's like a special
it's like a
Game & Watch thing,
right? Yeah, let me double check that I'm not crazy. It's one of those things that I admit I bought. I'm part of the problem, but have never actually opened and played. I just thought it was cool.
It's out of stock online, but it does include Link's Awakening.
Yep,
There's
Zelda,
Legend of Zelda
2, and Link's Awakening on there, which is like a solid way to play it. I think like that little machine with the 2 buttons. Like I think that would be a good way to play the game if you haven't.
Yeah, it also has a special Zelda-themed Game & Watch game called Vermin, which it's an original. It was on the original Game & Watch, but now it stars Link. It just has Link's head instead of Mr. Game & Watch.
Yeah, it's also a clock.
It's also a clock because you don't have any of those. There's no way of knowing what time it is unless you have a Game & Watch.
Of course.
But Kyle, thank you so much for joining me for this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me, allthingsnintendo@GameInformer.com, or hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, or Blue Sky @Brian P. Shea. You can also join the Game Informer Community Discord, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel, even just for 1 month. Kyle, tell everyone where you are on the internet.
Still poking around on Twitter. Blue Sky is actually the one I've been using the most, and I'm Kyle Hilliard on there. I was able to drop that M. I usually have Kyle M. Hilliard, but I'm just Kyle Hilliard on Blue Sky, so find me there. That's the place I'm the most active, I think.
I thought about dropping the P when I went over to Blue Sky, and well, I mean, I can't do it on Threads because it's linked to your Instagram. But I was like, no, I'm just going to keep it consistent across all the platforms.
Yeah, which, maybe I made a mistake, but I was like, it's time. Let's go for it.
That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.